Alright, today I'm going to try and concentrate down some hydrogen peroxide. So to start off, I'm going to get this beaker here, and I'm just going to see how much hydrogen peroxide I actually have. And so this is all 3% hydrogen peroxide. It's normally used for medical things. So I have a second smaller bottle here. So it looks like I have about 70 milliliters of hydrogen peroxide. And so if I'm starting at 3%, I want to get up to 30% today. And so I would need to get that boiled down to just 70 milliliters. So here I have a separate beaker that's filled up to about 70 milliliters, and that's just of water. So I can take the hydrogen peroxide, set to the side. Now I'm going to take this flask, I'm going to add the 70 milliliters of water. Now you can see where that is at the bottom, and I'm going to mark that onto the beaker so I know when to stop boiling it. So now here you can see there's a little mark, so I know when I can stop. And then the concentration will be at 30%. So I can now dump this water back out. And then, I can add the 3% hydrogen peroxide into the flask. Alright, so now we move this hot plate over and begin heating it. And I don't want to bring it to a boil because hydrogen peroxide decomposes at around 100 degrees Celsius. And so I don't want it to ever get that hot. However, I do want it to be hot enough so that the water will evaporate quickly. So I can just leave this here for a while and hopefully the volume should shrink. Alright, my phone's about to die, but I think the volume went down a little bit, so I guess I'll just cut to when it's done. Alright, so this is taking a lot longer than expected. You can see down here that we still got a little bit of a ways to go. So I'm going to try and upgrade the apparatus a bit. So brought in this vacuum pump here, and I'm just gonna set that off to the side. Plug it in. Now I can take this thermometer connector, unscrew that top part, so now I can connect this. Alright, so now I have that attached there. And I'm going to take this other end and connect it onto the vacuum pump. Now I have this stopper and a little bit of Vaseline. So I'm just gonna now we have that sealed there, and got to cover up this. So all right, and now that can get connected right there. So now we're just gonna see what happens when I turn this on. Oh. So it's kind of shaking there. I set this on the table, but you can see that the tube has pulled the vacuum, and in there we're starting to see a little bit of bubbling, which means it is boiling. So that should make it go by a little bit faster, and I'll just set this into a time lapse so that you can see that. Alright, so after quite a bit of waiting, you can see that we're about to the line now. Unfortunately, there does appear to be some melted Vaseline in there. It's somewhat hard to see, but there are little bubbles floating around. And that comes from these joints, which I greased with Vaseline. Must have melted and fallen in. So I'm going to need to clean that off. And then I can store, well, I'll need to test it, and then I can store it away. So I will do that now. Alright, so we can take this and pour it out into the beaker. Now that it's in this, you might be able to see a little bit more clearly the specks of Vaseline floating around in there. And so to get that out, I think I'm just going to use filter paper, which should hopefully just trap the Vaseline in it. And then if that doesn't work, I might have to use the separatory funnel. But I will start that. Alright, so now it looks like there's no Vaseline left. Unfortunately, looks like my line was not too accurate. as I have about 100 milliliters of solution instead of the 70 that was expected. So I think what I'm going to do is just let it heat up, not boil, for a couple more minutes to see if I can evaporate off any more water. So we'll put that on there, and I will set this onto a time lapse. Okay, so I don't know if you can see this. I've just turned the heat off. But in this solution, it kind of looks almost like caramely. It seems somewhat thicker, but just stirring it produces bubbles, which I know doesn't happen with normal water. So I'm worried that that is the hydrogen peroxide decomposing somehow. The temperature says it's at like 91 or something. So I'm a little confused, but I just hope that too much of my product isn't lost. So I'll have to test that. Alright, so now to test how concentrated we got the hydrogen peroxide, I'm going to put it into this smaller beaker. Unfortunately, I don't have a graduated cylinder, so I can't get very exact volumes. But I'm gonna mass that. It's like 51 grams. I'm gonna tare it, and then I can take this hydrogen peroxide and pour it on. And so we're at 58 grams. And then we lower this down. We can see the volume here. And so the volume looks to be about 50 grams. So it is more dense than water, which is a good sign. And so we can now just do some math to figure out the concentration of that. Alright, so here you can see I did a little bit of math. We know that the density of water is 1 gram per milliliter. The density of hydrogen peroxide is 1.45 grams per milliliter. With that, we can make an equation here, which gives you a graph where on the x-axis you have concentration, and on the y-axis you will have density. To figure out the density of our solution, I took the mass, which is 58 grams, and divided it by 50 milliliters to get a density of 1.16 grams per milliliter. With that, I plugged that into the equation, and it solved to be 35.55% hydrogen peroxide. You can see the graph here as for how I got that number. So, I guess that's it. We have our concentrated hydrogen peroxide. Actually a little bit better than I was expecting. Not really sure how that happened, but that's cool, I guess. So, yeah. Oh, and one more thing to help prove that the hydrogen peroxide kind of works. You can see on my finger there how it's turned white. It doesn't really come off, but that is something that I've noticed happening with higher concentrations of hydrogen peroxide, such as 30% when I've used it before. Not actually sure what's happening, and hopefully it won't be a problem. It always would go away within like a day or so. So, yep. Alright, so now we can just take our new hydrogen peroxide and put it into the bottle for future use. Alright, and then to label it, it's now being 35%. Alright, and we are done.